Principia Theologica, Lecture 10, the truly democratic voting profile. Hi, my name is Sol Soler, and I am a philosopher and a theoretical physicist. And in this episode, I am going to make the logical and ethical case for why America, the United States of America, at least the United States of America, should immediately begin experimentation with a truly democratic voting profile. Okay, so this is to do with politics, modern, global, human politics in 2021. So, first I'm going to state the problem, and then I'm going to offer a solution. And I think that the solution is so simple, logical, plausible, and possible that I think as citizens of the earth, we are morally obliged to start experimenting with the solution that I offer. So yeah, do keep that in mind at all times, how simple this is, how simple this solution is, how logical it is, how plausible it is, and how possible it is. Okay, so, but first we state the problem. So the problem is modern human politics. These ideas can be applied to any first world Western country, but I'm particularly going to focus on America because they are the leaders of the political and cultural and military leaders of the world, or they are the most powerful of the leaders of the world. And the whole world pays attention to America more than it pays attention to any other country. And so this means that my discussion can have wide appeal for anyone that's been paying attention to modern American politics and global politics, international politics. And the problems are, America is a very extreme country, a country of extremes. So the problems are most easily identified in America. So, what is the problem? Well, I'm going to suggest that we all know what the problems are, and that we've known what the problems are for quite a while. And I'm also going to suggest that we all know that things at the moment for humanity aren't really going very well. Things are kind of bad at the moment. I think we're all agreeing on that. Now, there'll be some people that disagree, but I think the vast, from my experience, based on people I talk to and the media I consume, I think maybe 90% of people will agree with me. Like I see that type of consensus when I'm online and in discussions with people. So yeah, I think the whole world is agreeing that things aren't going very well at the moment, and that we're in a bit of a cultural decline. Most people seem to be we seem to be saying this about ourselves online. Like, we seem to be acknowledging this. We also are all acknowledging that our political systems aren't adequate. They're not functioning in a satisfactory way, and that there are some blatantly obvious problems with our political systems that we all know about now, and we all just accept as a part of our daily political life. So yeah, things aren't going well. There's coronavirus, of course, but then apart from that, there's, very high rates of mental illness and drug abuse, poverty, suffering. and political systems that the vast majority, you can have a country where the vast majority of the country don't approve of their own government. Okay. So, yeah, let's zoom in a little bit on America now, although a lot of this is applicable to many other countries, many other developed Western countries. So in America, I think, what can we say about the American government? And we can say these things about a lot of governments, a lot of modern governments. So I'm not trying to pick on America. I'm just using America as the clearest example of our modern political situation. Well, what can we say about America and the American government in particular? We can say that this American government is not trusted by the people of America. And we can say that quite generally. It's not this lack of trust is bipartisan. It's not like when the Democrats are in power, America is a corrupt disaster. But when the Republicans are in power, it's a noble success with no corruption whatsoever. That's not true. People's complaints with the government are at a more fundamental level than the two-party system. It's the entire system itself that is deemed by the vast majority of normal Americans corrupt, greedy, and untrustworthy. And then we all know the most famous examples of these types of things. So, for example, it's a long time ago now, but weapons of mass destruction and going to war based on basically invented evidence. What other examples are there? There's the 2008 economic crash, where very wealthy people, very wealthy bankers took risks, illegal risks that they shouldn't have taken, and engaged in financial activities that they shouldn't have engaged in, and they crashed the economic system. And then, not exactly the government, the Fed, but that's the Fed is intimately linked to the government. The Fed bailed out the bankers that were actually responsible for the crash in the first place, and this was against the will of maybe not all Americans, but a very large majority of Americans, and it kind of split America into the 1% and the 99%, approximately. And it made manifest that America is actually a oligarchy. It may be a somewhat democratic oligarchy, but it is all the same. More fundamentally than being a democracy, it's an oligarchy. In reality, in terms of how the country is run, America is actually, it can call itself, America is free to call itself whatever it wants, and it can call itself a democracy and claim it's a democracy. But if you actually look at the mechanisms by which decisions are made, America is an oligarchy. The more money you have, the more say you can have in the operations of the government. And, very rich businessmen, oil, people involved in oil and the weapons trade, these people the owners of these companies wind up with a lot of power over the government because of how much money they have. This seems to be more or less accepted fact. At least it was when I was growing up where I was living, kind of accepted by almost everyone, that the American government went to war based on forged evidence, basically. Definitely not sufficient evidence, that people were lied to, basically. And yeah, I think it's very well understood that money buys power in America. And that if you don't have any money in America, you're fucked. Like, that's kind of, that policy isn't outspoken by the government. It's just the way the government runs the country. You're an American and you're poor, fuck you, is kind of sums up the American political approach, economic approach to poor people. You know, if your water goes, if your water supply is contaminated or broken or disrupted, if you're poor, fuck you. If you're rich, it will be fixed immediately. But if it happens in a poor part of the country, like Flint, Michigan, fuck you, and fuck you for years. And then the same with healthcare. American healthcare is, if you're poor, you know, fuck you, die on the street, essentially. Like that's the way that's what happens. So, however, even if the system doesn't say that that's what it's trying to do, that's what's happening. So that's the reality of the functioning of the American government. And yeah, okay. So those things are terrible, obviously. And what you have is a government that is failing in its job and failing its people. And if it's supposed to be a democratic government, that's exactly what a democratic government should be trying to avoid. And these things could be avoided, but the government's corrupt, which, you know, it's an oligarchy. So the more money you have, the more power you have, the more decisions you get to influence. And then these rich people in power make decisions that benefit themselves. And that is at the expense of poor people and middle-class people. Like, these things seem totally kind of established. Then you have this two-party system, and the people of America don't split into those two parties neatly anymore. And the whole government has become a kind of a shambles and a laughing stock that no one had. You know, the American government used to work because it used to be respected by the people. And it used to be respected by the people because it worked. Not that it was perfect. But it was, you know, people thought it was a good system and believed in it and respected it. Now the people of America don't respect the American government and don't respect politicians. All them, you know, politicians just aren't trusted in general. And even when a good politician comes along, the system is too corrupt, too intrinsically corrupt for them to do any real lasting good for the poor. So, for example, well, maybe I'm not sure if Obamacare is working or not, or what the story with Obamacare is at the moment. But Obama came in and tried to change the healthcare system, and it was made almost impossible for him. And definitely American healthcare hasn't improved, or at least, you know, you're still fucked if you're poor. Which is the issue, really. That's the crux of the issue. If you're poor, you might not get basic essential medicines because they'll be priced so high that you can't possibly afford them. And why is this being done? So billionaires can be even more billionaires and then spend the money on private jets and, you know, ultimately worthless things that are obviously far less important than. Anyway, this isn't a diatribe against the rich or the mega wealthy. These problems are cultural, and it is an issue of greed, but you can't put all the blame on the 1%, especially when the other 99% would, if they had the opportunity, would jump into that 1% as fast as they possibly could. Like, Americans might complain about the 1%, but every single American, not every single American, but most Americans are, you know, like money enough that they would immediately jump into that 1% if they could. And then they'd start buying all the usual stuff, Nikes and private jets and all this stuff. So those are the problems, really. Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, no politicians are really trusted anymore. The whole Trump thing was a kind of very symbolic fiasco. It proves that your government is an oligarchy, because Trump basically used his billionaire. He didn't use his billions so much as he used his billionaire influence to pay his way into the White House. Well, maybe, a lot of people supported him as well. But I'm just pointing out, it's just very symbolic that as a democracy descends into pure oligarchy, that a businessman pays his way into the White House. And as the government falls apart, it becomes more and more of a sideshow, a circus sideshow, and an embarrassing global spectacle. Let's be frank. So yeah, and Trump obviously wasn't trusted at all, but Hillary's not trusted at all as well. Barack Obama was trusted, but he, at the end of the day, he was a part of that whole Flint, Michigan thing, and who knows what type of pressure he was under to be a part of that. Who knows what type of decision that was for him, based on things that we can't know about. Pressures that we just don't understand because we haven't had these things explained to us by the advisors in the White House, But yeah, so the government's a fiasco. It's a global spectacle. It doesn't have the confidence of the people. The government has proved itself corrupt countless times, proved itself of dishonesty many times as well, and documented. It's committed, according to Noam Chomsky, the American military has committed a litany of war crimes. But anyway, let's not get into that at all. It's not what this is about. This isn't to blame America. This is just to describe America's current situation and to say, this isn't working. We need to do something. And then politicians aren't trusted, generally speaking, and have proved themselves untrustworthy. There are some trustworthy ones, but it seems that the system is so intrinsically and completely corrupt that even the good ones struggle to do lasting, meaningful good. So that's a disaster. Then there's climate change and the government's behaving irresponsibly with respect to climate change, not taking the necessary measures to combat climate change because the government and the people invested in the government don't want to lose any money based on their business and their economy. And obviously it's incredibly stupid to put the economy ahead of the planet itself. The planet is fundamental to the economy, given that the planet is what the economy is taking place on. So we've got to take care of the planet first, obviously, logically, ethically. We've got to take care of the planet first before we take care of the economy. We've got to try and take care of both, but we definitely have to put the health of the planet is definitely more important. As in, billionaires can suffer some losses if it means that we save the planet. Okay? And billionaires will just have to accept that. This is not to suggest communism or the redistribution of wealth at all. It's just what I'm actually suggesting is true, genuine democracy, which I'm going to claim the internet has made at this stage not just possible, but absurd for us not to start instantiating real democracy by way of our new technology. Okay, so those are the problems. Yeah, climate change as well is an issue. Governments ignoring people's protests about climate change and doing nothing to curb the dangerous activities of mega wealthy corporations. Okay, so that's the problem. The problem is, as a functioning government, a dysfunctioning government that doesn't serve the people, and that all too regularly does things that the majority of the country don't want them to do. Okay, so that's not, if a government ever does something that 90% of the population doesn't want it to do, then it's not democratic. Okay. Because that's totally basic to democracy. If 90% of the people don't want something to happen, it shouldn't happen. Or else you just plain and simply do not have a democracy. So I don't know what percent of people didn't want the banks to be, but I don't know, I'm not saying it's 90% at all. But let's say it was. The government in Ireland, I think it was. Everyone seemed outraged about the idea of the banks being bailed out, but then that's just what the government did. I'm not sure if it would be 90% at all. But anyway, we have governments that do things that kind of do what they want, basically, and take very large salaries and live in great luxury and don't do anything meaningful to help the poor. And then you have a country like America, which is a first world country, but it's not, like America is just not a first world country because that country can't supply clean drinking water to all its citizens. And that issue lasted for years. So if a country can't supply clean drinking water to all its citizens, like all the time, with maybe some small disruptions because of natural disaster or whatever, where things have to be repaired, but those were, if the water goes out in Ireland, it doesn't matter which neighborhood it goes out in, it's fixed. It's not just fixed. It's not fixed immediately in the rich people's neighborhoods, and then not fixed for years if there's a problem in the poor people's neighborhoods. So there's technically you can say that America is it is the wealthiest country on earth, but it's not a first world country because they can't supply clean water to all their citizens for years. So that's not a first world country, and that's a disaster. If you have a country as the wealthiest country in the world isn't living like a first world country, the most advanced, the freest country, the richest country, the wealthiest country on earth isn't living like a first world country. So there's a way in which this immorality, and it is immorality, but it's a generalized immorality. It's not just the 1%'s fault. It's very generalized to the whole population. It's just greed, an obsession with material things. And there are reasons, philosophical reasons that that's taking place. And it's no particular person's fault and no particular group's fault. It's just fear, a manifestation of fear. And the reason people are fearful now is because they've lost their spiritual roots. Okay. Anyway, I won't get into spirituality now. You can check my other lectures where I explain the spirituality of all this with very good and optimistic news. So those are the problems. Untrustworthy, inept, greedy, corrupt government, and just a fiasco of just a political fiasco. And it's become, again, the symbolism, Donald Trump reality TV star. And that's what American politics is, really. It's reality TV, and it's fake. What the politicians say is not the truth, and sometimes they hide the truth from the people and they call it intelligence, and they don't tell people things, and then they make rash decisions based on this intelligence that a lot of people suspect are motivated by just making money. So those are the problems. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is definitely not a revolution. So the first thing we do is rule out revolution as a solution. Revolution is not a solution to this. Neither is protesting. The government just ignores your protests. I'm not saying they're totally worthless, but very clearly your government ignores them. They might have some worth in terms of human spirit and in terms of inspiring young people to be different and to run the world differently when they're older. But in terms of the immediate government of your country, the government ignores your protests. So revolution is not the answer, protests aren't the answer. Revolution is not the answer because revolutions are destructive, they cause damage. And you don't want to damage your own country, that's stupid. Okay? You live there. You live there. And your children live there. So anything destructive is just plain stupidity. Because you live there. And you know, a lot of what's happening in America is good. There is a lot of good infrastructure. There is not just a great country there. It's just being strangled by its government. So, you know, obviously America needs to loosen that stranglehold. Not get rid of the government, not destroy the government, but loosen the political, oligarchical, corrupt stranglehold that the government currently has over the country. Okay, so revolutions are dangerous and destructive, so you don't want a revolution. Protests are meaningless and don't do anything, so no need to protest them. Unless you want to. Protests are great fun. It's great for community spirit and things like that. And to show the government, you know, how you all feel. But, to repeat, your government has proven that it will just ignore you. Okay. Then also, the solution is not a change from capitalism to communism. Communism is not the solution either. It's not about a shift in political system. Well, it is, but it's about it's not about a shift to a new political system, like communism. Americans don't like communism. Americans like competing with each other. Americans like winning competitions and showing that they've earned the most money, and that, you know, that proves something. That, you know, it proves they're good at doing that, and it proves that they're intelligent and good businessmen, and they thrive on that competition. So you want to keep free market capitalism. So it's not a change to communism, because people suggest that a lot. That's not a good idea. What it is a slow, peaceful, careful, experimental, and above all peaceful, to repeat, peaceful transition, cooperative transition from where America is now to true democracy, or closer to true democracy, where it's actually the majority voice of the country or of the state, depending on whether it's a state vote or a nationwide vote, where it's the majority of the people of each district making the decisions, and not a small group of very rich men. Because that's what America is at the moment. Small groups of men making the decisions. And these men like yachts, and they like sex islands, and they like all sorts of stuff. And they should not be making all the decisions of America in 2021. Okay, so it's got to be peaceful. You don't want to attack yourself. You are America, and it is ticking. You know, America is ticking over. Your hospitals are still running. Your police are still working. Your fire brigades are still working. Schools are still running to some extent. You know, with you know, given the virus. So. Yeah, you don't want to disturb or disrupt or damage any of that infrastructure and any of your system. And that system it functions by way of the government. So you need to keep the government. You need to keep the government as it is. But then you just need to start steering the government towards true democracy. And this you now are capable of doing as a people. So you want to go from now you're in a pretend democracy where people are like, yeah, USA, democracy, freedom. And you're not, it's a joke, you're an oligarchy, and fuck you if you're poor. is the reality. And fuck you if you're a poor country with oil under the ground. Also, sometimes. Let's get real. So yeah, it's a transition to true democracy. From where you are now, which is somewhat democratic, there are some democratic ideas and some democratic institutions that are actually functioning and doing good, but there's a lot of corruption, so it's just about cleaning up all that corruption and making for a true democracy. But there's only one way to have a true democracy, and that's if everyone is involved. So that means the whole country has to get involved in this, at least all the adults who vote, all the voting adults need to get involved in this. So I'm going to suggest, what I'm putting forward is the idea that one simple experiment can start this off, and I think it's already started, can start this off. You just need to do one simple experiment at some point, and you will solve all these problems that we've been discussing with one simple piece of technology, and that piece of technology I call the truly democratic voting profile. So all I'm suggesting is an unofficial experiment by the people of America, because you can do you have the internet now, and sometimes people group together and do experiments. You know, if you have a survey you want to do, you can go to Reddit and say, hey, will anyone do my survey? And people on Reddit are nice, and I guarantee you'll get people to answer your survey for you. And if it's an interesting survey or a controversial survey, you'll get millions of people to answer your survey for you. And that's democracy. So what I'm claiming, so not only am I claiming, so I'm claiming that the truly democratic voting profile will make your country truly democratic. I'm also claiming that it's already happening. That this democratization, this shift towards true democracy, where the actual people are in control, and not one king or one government, one president, where the actual people are making the important decisions for the country, is already happening. And why is it happening? Because of our phones and because of the internet. Just the way the internet is, the way as a means of communication, the internet is actually, more than anything, it's a lot of votes. You know, the internet is more than one thing, but one of the main things that it is voting. Like liking something is a vote, disliking something is a vote. Upvoting on Reddit is a vote. So democracy has already been established. Internet democracy has actually already been established, which proves what I'm saying. It's a proof of concept. Reddit, for example, is proof of concept because democracy has been established there. It's not a perfect democracy, but it's much more democratic than the government of the United States, and people are much happier with it. Like, people like Reddit, and people agree with how it's run. It's run very fairly. You know, you get some asshole moderators who don't understand free speech, but apart from that, it's fine. And it's democratic, and it involves voting. So yeah, these phones aren't here just to waste time and ruin our eyesight, and so we can scrutinize one another's genitalia all day. Our phones and the internet are actually here with a much bigger purpose, or we're going to discover a much bigger purpose for them, which is true democracy. So the phone that you have in your hand or your pocket, and that you have in your hand or your pocket all day, every day, and is now a part of your, the humans have evolved themselves. The mobile phone is a part of the evolution of the human species. It's just that we've made it ourselves, and it's not physically connected to our body yet. But we've evolved ourselves, because there's that fish that lives very deep in the bottom of the ocean, anglerfish it's called, and it's got like a piece of wire coming out the top of its head, and hanging off the wire, natural wire that's grown, hanging off the top of the wire is a light. And when you see that fish, you're like, whoa, cool, this fish has evolved a light bulb growing out the top of its head. And you're like, wow, that's pretty cool evolution. But we've done the same for ourselves, because everyone has a phone, and on your phone you turn on the flashlight feature. So now literally every human has the flashlight power now. Like, we've evolved ourselves with these phones, because we do all have them, and it's revolutionizing our communication. It's revolutionizing how we work, how we share information, how we live, how we think. And we need to become conscious of that. And one of the key words in all this is consciousness. We need to become conscious of that and update ourselves and update our governments accordingly. Because we are living with a government that's about 100 years too old for the society that it's controlling. And because technology develops exponentially, that's intolerable. And that's why America is in so much pain at the moment. Because that's the truth about it, really. America is in pain and crying out in pain and disunity. So what you need to recognize is that you're a modern species with modern technology, modern thinking, modern morals. You're woke. You're not racist anymore. All this stuff. But, at the same time, you're hyper modern. You're technological. Everything's modern and online now. But then your voting system is absurd. You vote once every 4 years. Absurd. How much, that's democracy. How much power do you really feel like you have voting once every 4 years between two people that you don't trust? Belonging to two parties that you don't trust? It's absurd. America voting every 4 years is absurd. It's stupid. That's what it is. And stupidity like that causes huge amounts of pain. And that's why America is suffering so much. Because America has no democracy. People don't have any power. And most people are middle class and poor. And if you're middle class and poor, fuck you. That's America's official message. If you looked at their behavior. Their official message to the people of America is, you middle class or poor, fuck you. And that's fucked up and wrong. And it's, it's greed to the point of evil, but it's everyone, because the whole country is obsessed with money. So you can't blame the 1% if you take their money in a heartbeat and do all the same stupid, tacky stuff they do, which is most people. Give $1 billion to most people, they'll go and buy a Ferrari, a Rolex, diamonds, lots of Nike shoes that they don't put on their feet and stuff like that. That's just... So you can't blame the 1%, it's just generalized. So then what you need is a feasible way of transitioning from one vote every 4 years to meaningful voting. Like if you're a democracy, your voting is the most important part of a democracy. Like that's what a democracy is. That's how the people... Like democracy means demos, comes from the Greek word demos, which means people. And then the krasi part is from the Greek word for power. So democracy means power of the people. And how is that power exercised in a democracy? It's exercised by way of voting. So you have to have your voting right. You have to have it up to date. You have to have it make sense. You have to have it not be absurd. And voting once every 4 years, given what modern America is absurd. It's stupid. So then, how do you do this? Well, you acknowledge that the means for true democracy have materialized in your hands, and that is your phone and the internet. And then you think, okay, well, what will happen? Do we petition the government to give us power? No, that's not a good idea, because the government one thing governments don't like to do is hand over any power. So what you do is just an unofficial experiment. You just start doing an unofficial experiment. The first thing to do is contemplate the idea. The first thing to do is accept genuinely and truly that the American government is not good, and it's not doing good, and it's actually doing bad, and that living like that is making you all very unwell psychologically. While some of you are rich, the rich people aren't psychologically speaking, the rich people aren't any better off than the poor people. They might be worse off in terms of depression, suicide rates, and drug abuse. So it's not good for you. So you need to do an experiment. Now it needs to be a plausible experiment, and basically it's just some democratic Mark Zuckerberg. I can't do it because I can't program at all. I can't use computers, or else I would do it. and then not us first, but someone else coding a voting profile that's just like Facebook, but there are no, well, it's not just like Facebook. There are no faces, no photos. Probably want to keep it black and white and simple and clear and keep it pristine, zero advertising, can't be owned by anyone. It's owned by everyone, and therefore it's owned by no one, and you can't use it for advertising or business in any way. It's totally separate from money and finances. And it's a voting profile. So some clever programmer would produce this voting profile, or maybe it'd be a group of them. And how would the voting profile work? You would set up a profile, set up an account. At first, it would just be an experiment, so these things wouldn't be very secure. Later on, these things become more and more secure, where they'll be linked to your social security and become official. But at the moment, it's just an experiment to gather data. So, yeah, this person programs a voting profile, and then he offers it to people. He says, look at my voting profile. If large numbers of people sign up to this voting profile, we'll gather really, really valuable information. For who? Not for a business, not for anyone in particular, but for anyone that wanted to see this information. So that is to say democratic information. Free for anyone to see at any time. Now, this is information that at the moment corporations and governments are paying billions for, because it's very valuable information. So the people should have it themselves. So a voting profile. So the voting profile will take some inspiration from Reddit in terms of upvotes and downvotes. And what it is a profile that you activate. You set up your voting profile, and once you're over the 18, and once you have an active voting profile, you're voting all the time, 24 hours a day, 365. So with a voting profile, you go from voting once every 4 years to voting every second. And when can you change your votes? Anytime you want. You go into your voting profile, sign in securely. Obviously, security will be an issue, but you trust the internet with your banking, so it can be made secure enough that you trust it with your money. So then you'll definitely be willing to trust it with your vote, because your money means more to you, generally. So my point being, if you're willing to trust the internet with your money, you can trust it with your voting. So instead of voting once every 4 years, you'll be voting 24 hours a day once your voting profile is active. What about the votes? Who comes up with the votes? They're suggested by the people themselves. So just like in Reddit, people can post things, any Redditor can post whatever they want. Anyone with a voting profile, a valid American voting profile, can suggest votes whenever they want. Suggest motions for votes. And then the best motions, the motions that most speak to people, the motions that make people want to vote, will be voted on the most, and they will rise to the top because they'll have more votes, and votes with the most votes will rise to the top. So the matters that are most important to American people will rise to the top. So, and people can suggest their own votes. You learn how to use it in school. It becomes active when you're 18. Like this is once it's fully established. Children are taught how to set up their voting profile and how to vote and how to use it in school as part of a course in school. And then they're already voting during school. And then at 18, their votes start actually being counted. On their 18th birthday, there'll be some sort of celebration. Oh, it's my voting party. Whatever. So that's for the future once it takes off. But what we will see, because the kids will be voting before they go live at 18, and what we'll actually see, and it'll be really funny and embarrassing, what we'll see is that they actually vote more morally and better than us adults. And then we'll be like, oh God, we got to include their votes from as soon as they're able to understand the votes, which will be very young, 5, 6, or 7. They'll be able to vote on the simplest, most basic things. So, which is just funny. Like, we don't let our kids vote, but the reason we don't let our kids vote is because they'd vote too morally. They'd vote our kids would vote to share if they understood the issues, and which is just the true funny ironic reason of why we ignore their political opinions. Okay. So yeah, then there'll be a lot to sort out. There'll be different pages of your voting profile. So there'll be an economics section. There'll be a climate change section where you give your opinions on climate change. There'll be an education section where you give your views by way of votes about education. Now, you won't have to fill it all out. Maybe you don't understand education. Maybe if you're not a teacher, maybe you have no idea about education. So you can just leave the education part. You have a click through it, see if there's anything that jumps out to you that you want to vote on, but you can leave everything blank if you want. Or maybe your wife is a teacher, so you say to her, and obviously you trust your wife, so you say, can you explain this to me? How should I vote here? And she can help you and inform you. Or you can go on YouTube and get advice on how to fill it out. But the thing is, people will vote because they'll be able to vote on anything they want, and they'll be able to vote on the things that are actually meaningful for them. So it will take some development. But yeah, then there'll be people on YouTube who will be like, I'm an economist. If you're middle class and you're a small business owner, this will be a YouTube tutorial. You should think about changing your voting profile this way. And then that economist would explain why. And if you trusted them and if you understood their explanation, you'd go and change your voting profile if you wanted. So YouTube would be a kind of parliament. And parliament, that's just the French word parle, which just means to speak. So parliament is just a place where we speak and debate. And YouTube is just a very natural and obvious parliament. And so is Twitter. These are truly democratic. These are the first in human history, truly democratic institutions ever that humanity has ever achieved. Because you might say, the ancient Greeks. Well, no, they had slaves. They didn't let women vote, and they didn't let non-Greeks vote. So that's not a true democracy. In America, you now have Twitter, where everyone is on Twitter talking all the time, and it doesn't matter. You can go viral no matter who you are. Okay, but it will obviously take some organization, but these things can be constantly updated. Like our civilization now doesn't work with one document. That's not how civilization works anymore. Civilization, just like our computer programs, just like our phones, just like all of our technology, is constantly being updated. You don't get a phone with one program on it and then that's just how it is for the whole time you're using the phone. No, you're constantly getting updates. That's what a government will be in the future. That's what a truly democratic online government will be in the future, constantly updated. Based on the Constitution, based on existing American politics, but done democratically. So the Constitution and all will still be the cornerstone of the American government. It will just be being modified, updated, evolved for the modern American people who are online, who are educated and educating themselves. Okay, yeah, another great example of democratization is education, where education is just naturally democratizing all over the world, thanks to YouTube, where you can be lectured on anything and by the best lecturers in the world for free, as long as you have a phone and a Wi-Fi connection. Like, it used to cost hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars for that type of education to go to Stanford or whatever. And now you can have Leonard Susskind lecture you quite brilliantly for free. And he's the best physics lecturer in the world, probably. Or one of them. So, yeah, what else did I want to say? It would constantly be modified. What about plausible? Yes, it is plausible, because Reddit and Facebook and sites like these just started off with one person experimenting a little bit. And seeing what happened, and then if they do something that people actually want, if they find a way for humans to express themselves in a way that they do want to express themselves, then it blows up, like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And the same would be the case for a democratic voting profile, because everyone at the moment wants to express their political views, and all Americans want more empowerment from their government. So a few more. So yeah, it had to be remembered that no one would own this site at all, not even the person that programmed it. If a person programmed it, they would give that programming as a gift to the country, and it would be used. They could maybe sign it, but no part would be permanent. It would all be open source, and it would be changed democratically by people working together like they do on Reddit. So at first, you can't immediately just switch over from what you have now to this true democracy, this true online democracy. So at first, you just do an experiment. You just get people to sign up to it and vote on the most relevant votes, and you start mining the populace for information that they can use for themselves. And here's why it's so interesting. Here's why it will bring unity, where at the moment you have disunity. At the moment you have two parties, and that naturally breeds division because the two parties have to fight each other. And it means that the country splits in half. And that means you're always voting on what you disagree about. Like that's a natural consequence of your two-party system, is that you always vote and argue and debate about what you disagree about. That's why all your political debates are aggressive disagreements. So what it means is that all your political discussion is what you disagree about, and you never focus on what you all agree about. What the voting profile will allow is for you to see naturally what you all agree about, because someone will suggest a vote. For example, let me give you a couple of examples. Someone might suggest a vote like, I think the American government should join in with whatever global measures are suggested in order to combat climate change. Like, I think the American government should join in totally with G20 to combat climate change. Now, people are very worried about the climate at the moment. And I think you might find that 90% of Americans would vote yes on a statement like that. We have to word it better than I did. But, make sure it's totally clear and unambiguous. But I think 90% of people would vote yes. I think the government should join in with whatever international pacts there are in order to combat climate change, even if it means suffering some economic losses, even if it means the economy slowing down somewhat. So you'd find what you all agree upon. And you could have state-by-state information as well, state-by-state voting. And yeah, people would just vote on what they understand and what's meaningful to them. And yes, of course, there would be people who spoil their vote, but they would be negligible. There would be people who spoil their vote or try and cheat the system or try and suggest nonsense votes. But most people care about the American government and care about expressing themselves. Twitter online at the moment is just Americans talking about politics more than anything. So people care and they want to express themselves, and that's what a voting profile will allow. It's also really important for the American people to have a place where they can speak in one voice to the government. So this is another reason why you're morally obliged to start experimenting like this. Because, we have a lot of unstable politicians. Macho men who don't make totally rash decisions and that we don't trust. But then these same men are in charge of nuclear weapons. I mean, that's not safe. You need if you're going to put someone in charge of nuclear weapons, you need someone you trust totally. And you just don't have that. So let's say you have someone, a rash person in charge, and they get into an argument with another rash leader of another country, let's say Russia. And then these two, politicians, neither of them wants to back down. And I know this is implausible, but stranger things have happened in political history. Neither man wants to back down, and before you know it, two countries that were at peace are now going to war for matters of male pride more than anything else. Now, if this were to happen, what a voting profile would allow would be an official place where the people could speak in one voice. So you'd have 99% of the population saying, at least, saying, we are not in favor of this war. We do not, and everyone would vote. and prove that that's not what they wanted. And you'd have motion after motion saying, we do not want this war with Russia. And then, the Russians could have a voting profile as well. And then the people there would be doing the same. We do not want this war. And then the two nations could just talk to one another for a start via the voting profiles and agree just to sit down and go on strike. And then the governments won't be able to go to war against each other, because the people don't want them to. A voting profile allows for the people to veto the government's decision. So again, if a financial decision is being made, these greedy financial bankers have collapsed the economy again, and then the government's like, okay, well, we're going to bail them out. On a voting profile, you can clearly say, the whole people can clearly say, no, do not bail them out again, for example. Or if England had a voting profile at the moment, they could all express the fact that, no, actually, we've changed our minds and we don't want Brexit because it's really a stupid idea, So it will allow whole nations of people or whole states of people or whole towns of people to express an opinion as one. That's one of the most important things a voting profile will do. And also to veto things that the government is going to do that they don't want to do. So again, here's another interesting motion. The government should clean up Flint, Michigan's water problem right now, immediately. That should be their number one priority for the American government right now. And if they say we don't have the money, then you say, okay, well now you don't get, your salary's cut. Your salaries, these guys are earning millions. Now your salary's cut. You don't get driven around by a chauffeur anymore. The people. This is not going into the White House with guillotines. It's not physically attacking the government. It's just telling them that they can't abuse their position anymore, and that poor people have to be taken care of as well. Because the idea that there's not enough money in the American government to immediately fix Flint, Michigan's water problem is ludicrous. The amount of money being wasted there, the amount of money being squandered on luxury, so much money being squandered on luxury of already exceedingly wealthy people. Okay, how long have I been speaking? Okay, so those are my. I can give some follow-ups. People have objections. But if you do have objections, remember, don't be cynical. We need the world to change for the better, and this is a real idea for how it can change for the better. And this is plausible. Facebook happened, Reddit's happened. Reddit's a democracy. Like Reddit's a fully functioning online democracy. Security, well, you trust online with your banking. That's your money. Trust it with that. These problems can be solved. We're a problem-solving species. Now we have a problem with our government, and the only moral, ethical path is true democracy, because it's the only moral form of government. These rich people in control of the country, these rich politicians and stuff, they're not serving us anymore. They're not more educated than us anymore. They're not more moral than us. They're not less greedy than us. They're just us, and power corrupts. So that's why we need power to be shared equally, but amongst everyone, so that it can't corrupt. And this is how to. So this is, and notice, this isn't a taking over of the government. This is a dialogue with the government where the people can start demanding things because they show 90%. A consensus agreement. Then the government can't ignore you once you prove that to them, and a voting profile will prove that to them. So it's really this is real hope, because it's actually a logical, sensible, good idea. It's just how cynical has the world become that maybe you just laugh. But at some point, and it's inevitable. At some point, obviously, we're going to do this, because education is just increasing. Like soon everyone on earth will receive enough nutrition and education, and everyone will be online, and hopefully we don't destroy ourselves with global warming. And then this is just inevitable. that humans will start governing themselves like that. It's just obvious because it's already happening in a lot of ways. So why not start it now? Why not? Let's not be cynical. Let's actually try something. And you can see how it will be a project unifying people, bringing people together, focusing on what we agree upon, as well as what we disagree upon. Okay, so yeah, if you have any questions or any doubts, anything you'd like me to clear up, let me know. Because I'm not suggesting that I have I'm not suggesting that was the complete solution. I'm suggesting that was the jumping off point for a conversation that will become the solution. And the solution won't be a single solution. It will be a constantly modifying, evolving government, because our society is constantly modifying and evolving. So we need a government that does the same. So I really don't think it's implausible. I actually think it's inevitable. It's just we have a kind of bit of a cynical attitude today, where people just want to laugh at you if you suggest something like this. So yeah, but I think I'm not trying to suggest these are new ideas, original to me. I know lots of people have thought about true democracy and voting profiles and things like that. What I've tried to do is just make it very obvious and undeniable, but that now is the right time. So yeah, maybe try and share it with other people and just see if there is any group of people who thinks that, yeah, now is the right time to actually try something. Try something resolutely peaceful, unofficial, just experimenting with people's opinions. It's just a Facebook for opinions and voting that nobody owns, that isn't used for business, that has no advertising on it ever. It's owned by every American, which is equivalent to it being owned by nobody. It can't be corrupted. So yeah, it's a good idea. Okay. So yeah, it'd be great if you tried that, I think. And just, someone might try a voting profile and it will go terribly wrong. But, then we'll try again. There was Bebo before there was Facebook, And there was Facebook before there was Instagram. So, yeah. I mean, we've got to do something. This is absurd. To just let the governments and politicians take the piss decade after decade. Because there's that saying, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. And it's not. The definition of, it's the definition of stupidity, really. It's not, and to just keep on going with the same system as once it's been fully established it's not working, and where maintaining it is just causing more and more unhappiness. Okay, so yeah, and Twitter almost already is this voting profile where people express opinions and they go viral and all, but we need an official place to do that, where we put our political caps on, have some decency, have some respect. Respect other people's opinions and their right to have them, and we just assess things rationally and look at what we all agree upon and what we all don't agree upon and make decisions from there and tell the government what to do, because they should be working for us. That's the ultimate goal, to get the government working for the people instead of working for themselves, because that line is far too blurred these days. And you don't want to have, this will also naturally equalize things. Like, we talk a lot about the 1%. Well, this is 1% kryptonite, because they only have 1% of the vote. That's how you cure the 1%. By voting, because the 99% greatly outnumber them, obviously. So, yeah. Okay, that's everything, I think. Yeah, check out my other lectures, because, as I said, I'm a philosopher and I'm a theoretical physicist, and politics isn't really my real subject. Consciousness is my real subject, and I've actually written the principles of the physics of consciousness. So, like Isaac Newton wrote, the principles of motion, I've written the principles of the physics of consciousness, and there's some really good news for humans there. In terms of the true nature of the universe and the possibilities for God and the human soul. So if you check out my other lectures, you can learn all about that. See the first simple, logical and intuitive interpretation of the experiments of quantum mechanics and things like that. So yeah, check that stuff out. It's really, really hopeful in terms of the true nature of our existence. Okay, so thanks for listening. Just think something like that at the moment is what we need to try. Something like that. So it's trying to get a discussion going, you know. And there are some solid ideas there. This can actually be done. It's plausible. You know, people have started taking the power back from the government. How? By working together online. So take the GameStop thing. That was a very democratic, an example of true democracy. Okay, so thanks for listening. See what you think. Any questions or doubts, let me know. And yeah, check out my other lectures. There are some really interesting ideas about consciousness, about God, about the human soul, about the nature of our universe. Okay, thanks for listening. I'll end this one with a prayer. This is a Buddhist prayer that I like, and I think is fitting. May all beings be breast. Oh, damn! Said breast. May all beings be blessed by the three jewels. May the planet be at peace. May the earth stay beautiful. May all beings be happy. May all have good fortune. Thanks. All the best.